Right now, let's have a chat about one of the positives to emerge from the coronavirus situation, the rise in the number of people volunteering. Have you given up your time to volunteer in the last few months? Tell me all about it. 0800 111 4041. I would love to know.
Dave Monk. BBC Essex.
Now, let's talk volunteering, because it is great to hear that the number of volunteers has gone up. Castle Point Association of Volunteer Services says it's seen an increase in the number of people doing just that, volunteering, during this coronavirus pandemic. Let's spread the word a little bit. Have you yourself volunteered to do something during the pandemic? What have you done? The charity that we're talking to today is based in Thundersley. They've been helping throughout the lockdown with things like delivering food parcels, prescriptions. Like many other charities, they've seen an increase in demand for their services, which means more volunteers are always needed. Well, Janis Gibson is the chief exec of the organisation. Janis, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you. I really appreciate it.
What have the last few months been like for you? Tell me all about it. Paint me a picture.
It's right. Mid-March, we were having a conversation, I think, on the Friday, saying if this pandemic, hits the shores of England, what do we do as an organisation? What do we need to start to think about? And within 5 days, the following Wednesday, we were in full swing of mobilising to support local community. It's actually Castle Point, Rayleigh and across Rochford. We've worked very closely with the local council and we set up a hub. We've raised funds to purchase food, and every single day, from mid-March to today and ongoing, our wonderful volunteers have actually been overseeing the management of that, packaging up the food, dealing with inquiries where some people might have special dietary needs because of, health allergies or whatever. And these volunteers have gone out day in, day out. So that's one aspect where we hit the ground running. Obviously, schools have had reduced service. We work with schools, so we've been sort of still receiving calls from them. We've also been working to reach all of the people that you would sort of have read have been shielded. So that's a lot of the people that have health conditions and will be at risk of going out, and we've made sure that they're well looked after. The volunteers have actually, again, underpinned support that they need. It might be prescriptions. It might actually be that we have to contact, a doctor. It may be a lot of different things. But the volunteers working with my team have been absolutely outstanding. Just to put that into context, as of last Friday, we had actually, since mid-March, had over 16,000 interactions with local people to support them.
Wow.
So that's very significant.
It's pretty good, isn't it, Janis? Do you know, many years ago, because you lot there at Castle Point, you've always been very, very enthusiastic about getting involved in things, and bless you for it. And some years ago, Essex County Council did a piece of work called Who Will Care, to try and find out what we're going to do in the future to care for a rapidly ageing population and so on and so forth. And you were in the forefront of that. And I think we're now finding out who will care. Do you know, the question has finally been answered, because over the last 3 months, we have seen that literally thousands of people are caring, which is brilliant, isn't it? You're
spot on. And I think we've all been on a learning curve, because before, if you take organisations like us across the whole of Essex, we all deal with people that are vulnerable in what is normal times. What this has shown is that the local infrastructure of organisations like our own, other sort of third sector organisations, have really hit the ground running, worked at pace and made things happen together with those volunteers. And I think if I am clear about one thing, it is actually about local support, local knowledge, local know-how to help local people. But collectively, right across Essex, that has worked really, really well. So, yes, there's been learning, and I think what, we are going to see, because we're all hoping that we get back to the new normal sort of times sooner rather than later. But I think the pandemic has actually heightened just how many people are out there that probably, even when life does get back to normal, they may be lonely, they may be isolated still, they may have anxiety. So for us, there's still a lot of work to do. But it's been a really, I'm going to use the word interesting, but it's a baptism of fire. But what it's demonstrated is how, the third sector has really, really, dealt with this. And also there's been small groups that from the word go set up, people, volunteers that are no longer at work, they've set up their own sort of options of support. They have been fantastic as well. And we've been working, across that sector as well to both mutually support each other. So that's been really pleasing, how we've all come together to provide that, local service to local people in a very meaningful way.
I'm speaking to Janis Gibson, who's the Chief Executive of a volunteering organisation in Castle Point. And Janis, you were talking about the number of volunteers and how important they are. Tell me about the increase you've seen over the last few months.
Well, obviously, at the start of the pandemic, those that could give their time would have put their names forward, and we would have worked with them in terms of how they could support us. One of the things that, we always have to be mindful of as an organisation is that we are, where we're dealing with people that are vulnerable or fragile, etc., that we've got people that have DBS checks in place, or where volunteers have come forward. For instance, does the food hub need, that kind of check? No, it doesn't. So we, there's the, we've worked with all those volunteers to really try and find an opportunity that where they can all contribute, and most questionably, without those, we would not have been able to deliver the service. We've been layering in and layering in and layering in volunteers. So, for instance, in normal times, we would run a befriending service to those that, are lonely and isolated. That stopped all personal contact. We've now got volunteers every single day, all day long, contacting the people we would have known, but also the people that have had to be shielded. Without those volunteers communicating with those people, life would be a lot more distressing for them. We've got volunteers that they're actually on a schedule. It's not a case of they're just doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They're actually part of the infrastructure. So it's just, what would we have done without it? Well, we certainly wouldn't be able to deliver the services that we have done. And also, there's a lot of volunteers, the whole cohort of volunteers, they all bring different skills. They all have different desires in terms of how they want to help, time frames of what they can do. So actually, even managing a new cohort of volunteers has actually been quite tough, but it's worked wonderfully, and they've worked relentlessly. So I can't praise them enough.
And Janis, do you think you'll be able to hold on to them when this all passes, which it will in time? Yeah. Do you think they'll want to continue? How do you keep the volunteers going?
Well, I think it's important always to be an organisation that looks after your volunteers anyway. If we forget the pandemic, the whole thing about having volunteers is that, one, they feel valued, but secondly, that there's purpose. And that's where you can actually offer some really good volunteering roles where there's purpose for those individuals as well. In terms of how will it change, I expect it to change because people will start going back to work. They won't be able to commit the time. But what I also know is that many of the volunteers we've worked with, they will, continue and probably do some work over a weekend or of an evening when they're able to still do whatever they do. So it will be interesting to see, but most certainly, I think we've got to be practical about when life returns to normal. Other people have got, commitments as well. But I'm sure we will retain a lot of people. And it's certainly, this time has heightened the profile of volunteering, and it will give a lot of people that haven't thought about it before that opportunity to explore, is it for them or not. So I think, we're all looking forward to this new normal. I think we're in this for a little while yet, and as we sort of approach the autumn and winter months, there's going to be a lot of people that will sort of need support still.
Yeah.
So absolutely, we need to treat our volunteers well and, assist them. There's training, there's development in normal times. It depends what individuals want. So we will see.
All right, Janis, why would you volunteer if you weren't having a good time? I mean, that's the fact. People are giving their time free, so it's got to be a good time. Can I just ask you another thing about money? Because I have spoken to several smaller Essex charities over the last few weeks, and there's a general feeling that the money that the government pledged for charities throughout this difficult time isn't really getting to the smaller charities. It's being, there's money there, but it's being gobbled up by the bigger charities. What would you say about that?
Oh, this is a contentious one, but I'll give you an answer. Yes, I think in terms of what the government has pledged is tremendous. I'm only going to speak from our own perspective because, that's where I can actually say. So if you take this time and the COVID period, yes, of course, we have commissioning services in place. We work with GP practices. We work with local council. We work with county council. So those processes and what we do are in place. During this period, if I'm honest, it's the generosity of the local population, because we went out, the food that has gone out every single day from the hub has actually been purchased as a result of the generosity of the public that have donated money to support that. And I suppose one would question, well, how long can an organisation do that? We've made it work. We've raised, money. Food is still going out. We've had a lot of support, in terms of recognition of the work. But I would say, I think it's fair to say that we have to see some finance following, because this is not a short-term situation where it's a long-term. So I don't know necessarily where that money is. But, for instance, we would not have received any additional funding as a result of the work we've done. But I'm hopeful that we will be shining stars in the sector, and there will be consideration about the value of what we bring and what our volunteers bring to our community.